I actually enrolled here in 1959. I was the fourth in my family to come to the university. I had two older cousins, my aunts, my dad's sister's children, and then my older brother followed them, and so I was number four. I had been on campus, however, numbers of times because I came out to see my cousin play football, and I came out, I was in a play called The Knave of Hearts. I wore a little tutu and dyed long underwear and so forth, and I was a guard and down at the old Showboat Theater. So I was familiar with the campus, and but when I enrolled here actually as a student and had to start going to class, and there was like 16,500 of us, I think, at the time, it was somewhat overwhelming because I was this crush of people, and I almost knew no one. Because, until I got to the football field, and then I knew, half the team. But on campus during the day, I actually think I had one class with another student from Garfield, and that was a lab class from biology, I believe. And she was the only person from Garfield that I had a class with. That's how you get swallowed up here so easily. So the first year, while I, kind of like I said, was familiar with the campus and everything, it was just still very overwhelming. The only class that was small was like the lab class and English classes. Other than that, I was in a sea of about 150 students, and I had never been in a class with more than about 30 or 35. So it was kind of overwhelming. And then, of course, there were very, very few people of color on campus. Like about half of the black men on campus were athletes, and there was probably maybe less women on campus than young men, from the African American community at least. But I liked it because, like I said, I was kind of the fourth in my family, and I knew that's what I had to do. My mother was a teacher, and who didn't teach, but she taught all of us at home. So I was kind of academically inclined, and so I knew I was going to college when I was a youngster. But it was different. My friends at Seattle University said, "Oh man, I'm so glad I don't go to UW. We have class sizes no more than about 45 or 50." And I thought, boy, that would be pretty neat. And a few students from UW actually transferred to Seattle U because they just felt they'd get a better education in a smaller school. My two brothers behind me also came through here, and we all graduated, 6 of us, to kind of start the tradition. Our family probably has close to 20 degrees now from the University of Washington, and a couple of my nephews and nieces are working on PhDs currently here. This is our university. That's the real buy-in. Yeah, there's no question. We've had a Hilliard in the University of Washington, like I said, probably from 1953 to the present, and there's probably only been a few years here and there where there was not a Hilliard on campus. I actually graduated late, like in '69, but I started in '59. But when I went to work, and had a family and so forth, I spent time on campus, and then I worked here. I was trying to finish up, and I came to work here, and I found out immediately that I didn't have any time to go to school when I first started working here in 1968. I mean, it was a real incredible push for several years. And I was also active in the community doing some things with the schools there because my children had started school, and I was with the decentralized school council, and I was working day and night for 2 or 3 years straight. I was in sociology, and there was so much going on at that time in terms of studies and change in lifestyles and what have you. And I remember one thing from the course in the family. They said the average age of a woman at the birth of her last child was 23 years of age. And all the women in class kind of groaned because, many of them were in their 20s already. But I just kind of nodded my head because we were all through when we were 22. The only yearbook that I was in was when I was a freshman. That was the only one I purchased, I should say, because I, received my freshman numerals for playing football on the freshman team. And I was in ROTC, and I was a guide on. And so my picture, however small, but you could see me because I was African American, dark skinned, I was kind of like over in the corner of our parade, and we did it up in the quad on whatever, I don't know, maybe it was around Memorial Day or something like that. So I had a picture with the Air Force ROTC unit, and my name was in there as having received my freshman numerals, and that was in the spring of 50, or let's see, yeah, I guess spring of 60, yeah, because I entered in 59. So I think that's probably my only historical note. On campus and in the community, there was this whole move toward social justice, the theme of your program. And so it was somewhat tense. A lot of people were not used to being confronted over social issues like this, social justice in particular. You know how traditional universities are. And so being told almost in a demanding way and being confronted about the university's shortcomings, and of course no one likes to have their shortcomings pointed out, particularly publicly in a major university, because, you know, this university has always regarded itself as pretty successful and in the upper echelons of public universities, and it should be. And I can see that and understand it. But for a group of students to kind of be kicking these people in the shins and telling them what they should be doing about some injustices that they saw and needed to be corrected, created some tension for them. And in the community, just shortly after Dr. King's assassination, of course, all across the country, this kind of response to his death by a lot of people, not just African American people, but just a whole bunch of people, felt that that was so unjust and unfair that people were looking for ways to contribute to making change in our society. And so there was tension outside in the community, there was tension on the campus. As a matter of fact, in the spring, I believe it was, of 1969, and you probably have some footage around here about it, there was a demonstration here at the beginning of the school year by people supporting minority contractors and businesses on campus, and it got very violent. They pushed a tractor in the hole down here at the Meany Hall site, for the new Meany Hall, I guess I should say. And people were arrested, and a couple of contractors or workers, were pulled out of their tractors, and a few blows were struck, and there was some violence on campus then. So there was activity going on all over the place. And of course, then there were demonstrations in the community over equal housing at the city council, the mayor's office down there. That was probably my first demonstration that I attended. I think that was probably 1964, 65. And the open housing ordinance to the city, I don't believe, was passed until close to 1970. But the protests began very early on. So all of that was going on in the context of community and educational responses and so forth in terms of social justice in the early 60s, or late 60s. I became a youth counselor at age 22 and went to work at a juvenile institution working with kids that had been arrested and adjudicated, so forth, through the counties and on to the state. And it was such a difference coming from that environment after 5 years and then to come onto this campus and work with the students that were here then, and also the new students that we began recruiting, was just such a contrast between the young kids that had kind of fallen off track that I had been working with since I had begun work really as a young person in the YMCA system. But the kids were going through not only an awakening here, but nationally. And they had organized meetings, the Black Student Union did in Los Angeles. There was a huge conference in 1967, which kind of galvanized their activities in terms of what they wanted to achieve during the next school year, which began in 1967-68 school year. And while I was privy to a lot of that, I didn't really get close to it until I got involved in the community politics back in, the following year, in actually 1968-69, with the school council and that sort of thing in the Seattle public school system, that they were also actively involved in. And not only that, many of them that were also in the BSU were also in the Black Panther Party in Seattle during the same time. And of course, it was looked upon as a pretty militant organization by the city fathers and so forth, particularly when they went to Olympia with carbines strapped to their shoulders and demonstrated down there in front of the Temple of Justice. That was pretty interesting. There was a lot of suppression in other parts of the country because the establishment was really being confronted by the Panthers in many ways. And as you know, they started in Oakland in response to the police department down there. The Oakland Police Department had as its history perhaps one of the more ruthless and unjust shootings of all the police departments in the West. And they were focused there. And so actually they caused this uprising of young people against that kind of treatment. The Seattle Police Department was a little more laid back. We had a liberal kind of governance with the mayor and the council. And on occasion, however, kind of being pushed by the federales, as the students referred to them, the FBI, they would occasionally go around and surveil the Black Panthers' homes, and they had these files on all the so-called militant leaders in the community. And then they had the shootings and everything in response to the Black Panthers in Chicago, just horrendous kind of killings, basically. But the community here, whenever there was this fear that there was going to be a raid on the Black Panther Party's office, there was generally 25 or 50 community people, activists, that would go and stand around the Black Panther offices and buildings until the police withdrew. And they were driving around and, well, it was basically the FBI, but they were using the Seattle Police Department anyway, as far as I could tell. I have no inside information on this. This is just eye-level kind of recognition. Because of my 5 years in juvenile corrections, I was in and out of the police department all the time, picking up kids that had run away and that sort of thing. So I recognized faces, and so I knew a whole lot of the police department's officers and detectives, and they knew me. So we would see each other, and I'd kind of give them the nod, and they'd kind of nod back in recognition. And so they were a little more laid back in terms of their approach to the Black Panther Party, but the Black Panther Party was pretty aggressive. What I perceived and what I recognized after I was hired to work here was that the students were pretty well organized in the Black Student Union, and then other ethnic organizations followed their lead and became fairly organized and active in pursuit of the same kind of goals and aims. So the organization, the student organization, I think was pretty high level, and they were very intelligent people. And again, the university's response to them was like, wait a minute, how dare you? But after the sit-in, it was like kind of upside your head, and we want these demands to be met. I recall that there, I think, was a request for like $50,000, that figure, to start a minority recruitment program, to send students out into the field during the summer to recruit people and so on. Well, $50,000 was a very, very small amount. I think during the first year of the program, we probably spent more than that on transportation and motels and so forth as we went around the state recruiting students to the university. And there was myself and Maddie Bailey in the New Student Services office doing that work. And then later, of course, we became part of the special education program with Dr. Charles Evans for about a year, a little more than that. And then Dr. Sam Kelly was recruited from Shoreline. And then we became the Office of Minority Affairs. So within about a year, we had about 3 iterations of who we were and what we were doing. But we knew what the objectives were because they were set out by President Odegaard, basically when we started in 1968 in June. It was put in place almost overnight. I think I was hired and I started work on June 3rd. And my first effort was to head out across the state because I knew the surroundings here. I knew the Seattle Public Schools, I knew the school board, I knew the superintendent, and so on, just from my own kids being involved in my activity in the schools. So I headed out to Yakima, where I had contacts and some friends over there, and started in Yakima, and then went from Yakima to the Tri-Cities, and then from the Tri-Cities to Spokane, and then from there down into southern Washington to Vancouver, and then kind of worked my way back up, stopping off at the Indian reservations on the way and so forth. Also, of course, visiting the Indian reservations in Spokane, Colville, and what have you, and then over to the coast. So that was just kind of a strategy that I developed because I knew that during the summer I could spend my time here in the Seattle area, but right in June I knew that these students would be graduating all around the state, and so that was the focus. And we had to be done by August in terms of getting students enrolled in the university. That was kind of our best deadline set by Dr. Harold Adams, who was the Dean of Admissions at the time, or Director of Admissions, and we also worked with Jim Ferlin, who was an assistant there and worked with our office in particular. So they also provided for us some late admission spots, something like 10 or 12 each year, because we'd have a few students that might be a little late getting their materials in, but were really desirous of coming here. So we were afforded the opportunity of bringing in a few students after the deadline. But by August, the first year, we had enrolled like 308 students, I believe, from around the state, and actually 258, I believe, enrolled and showed up here in school. And that was done in a roughly 2-month period. So yeah, that was very fast. But we had a lot of cooperation from the admissions office. They actually worked hand in glove with us. My assistant and secretary, Maddie Bailey, was just incredible. She had been working in new student services for several years, and so she knew the process and how they used to go out and visit schools and talk to, the counselors and what have you. And I had counselor contacts across some of the schools because I was pretty active in student government. I was president of the Boys Club at Garfield, and we had intergovernmental programs, and we had our retreats in the summertime, and so I knew a lot about the schools and how they operated, and felt pretty comfortable going in, recruiting students and talking to staff and teachers and counselors. I had the students talking to students primarily. I really talked more to the parents, especially outside of the Seattle area, because a lot of parents were a little afraid of sending their daughters in particular, or even sons, over to the big city to go to that great big university. So I would basically try to allay their fears and talk about the counselors that we were hiring and that we had on campus, and our effort to reach out to them in particular, and invited them to come to the campus if they would like to just see exactly what would be going on and visit with their children that would be coming over here and so on. And the students would more or less recruit the students, although I would talk to them about their desires and whether or not they were really interested in being in higher education, because even though we were offering this special opportunity to make some real change as quickly as we could, we wanted to be sure that the students that we were bringing here were serious, because this institution and many others were always kind of referred to as an alien academic environment for our people, more or less, because there were so few of us here. And as a student, I considered it pretty alien, and at times even a little bit hostile, because a lot of people just weren't used to seeing people of color on campus. And sometimes you go by and people would stare at you, and you walk into class and sit down, and as people would come in the classroom, they'd flash and do double takes and that sort of thing. So it was kind of uncomfortable, but I knew what it was like to be uncomfortable in all-white organizations because of my involvement in the YMCA and leadership organizations there in school, where I was usually the only black person there. So it didn't bother me that much, but it was, something that went on. And a lot of parents didn't want their children subjected to that sort of thing. So a lot of that was, a lot of dynamics were being played out as we tried to get people in the community to understand that this university was really a statewide university, and that we were making it welcome to people of color. We recruited a number of students from Pasco, and many of whom were very successful. We recruited 2 young Hispanic men out of the same family, and one year, and then his younger brother the next year, and both of them ended up working in Olympia down in the state capital and were very successful. And in fact, their family then, their mother and father, moved to Olympia, where they were, and they all ended up basically moving their residence from Pasco to Olympia. But we had a lot of successes from even the first group of students to go on and do some incredible things. And I'm sure you're familiar with the EOP banquet that they have every year, and you hear these stories about these students that have done just incredible things in their lives, coming from sometimes very, very meager beginnings, but having this academic prowess that, you know, no one knew about until they actually ended up showing up here on this campus. And all of a sudden, you know, they just kind of blossom. And you hear these stories about them every year at the banquet, and it's just heart-rending to see what a lot of the young people have achieved. I think that socially, we kind of hit a crest and plateau, probably in the early 80s in there somewhere. And during the Reagan administration, we kind of backslid nationally with human rights and integration and a lot of things. Probably the only area that we continued to make strides was probably in housing. And that's probably where we're doing better now with the redevelopment of a lot of the low-income housing around particularly King County here and in other parts of the country. Academically and recruitment-wise, we have a whole group of middle-class students out there in all ethnic groups now. And I was kind of rehearing people talk about what happened in the 60s and 70s, and a lot of people described it as an effort to create this minority middle class because we had a lack of the middle class in the northern cities in particular. Because of segregation in the South, there was a lot of middle class people, you know, from the historically black colleges and universities and that whole thing, but not in the northern cities and particularly not in the Northwest. But a lot of people made a very good living because, you know, they worked at Boeing and in the shipyards and what have you. But there wasn't a lot of expectations regarding higher education. And since this school did not really reach out to people of color then, there wasn't much of an expectation of going on to school. And the people that you saw were pretty much the athletes that were outstanding in their particular sport. And then you saw them out here performing out here. And so that's kind of the recognition, what you saw of the university as a picture for people of color. Not much in the way of high academic performance, although we had a lot of people that, you know, went through, not a lot, I'm using wrong terms here. We had some people that went through and graduated in the law school and what have you, and the very few in the professional schools other than law. Sociology used to always have at least a couple of African American adults that had been in their field practicing for years and then were recruited in, given scholarships to get the MSW to go into some, you know, kind of higher level sociology, counseling, directing, managing, and that sort of thing. Now, I haven't been really close to campus for many, many years. I've been off campus. I left here in '75 after working here for about 7 years. And as I've come back for various reasons to talk to the administration, have meetings and so forth, the commitment to the program has stayed strong over the years. The Office of Minority Affairs continues and is healthy. And the university campus here really embraced the minority student programs in the 60s and 70s through contributions, payroll deductions to the scholarship programs, and very large amounts of money over the years. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars, perhaps millions by now. But overall, because of the backsliding of the 80s, I think, and so on, and then, of course, we passed I-200 here, which interfered with a lot of efforts that we had, you know, made and so on. It became a little more tenuous in terms of how you would get students on the campus and also then get them into the community and working in organizations and get them jobs. So it's been a little bit different and difficult in the more recent years. But again, the quality of students has increased considerably over the numbers of students that we had that were high-level achievers back in the old days, because there wasn't a lot of motivation for high-level achievement, because the professionals that you saw in the old days were basically teachers, social workers, and, guys that had degrees worked in the post office and places like that. So there wasn't a lot of motivation to go on and get a higher educational degree. Right. I always try to encourage them to just think about the future. Think about the future. They will become role models themselves. They will become successful individuals with a college degree, and kind of make it routine for other people coming along to look at them and say, well, they went through, and I remember when they were out on the streets picketing and doing their thing and so forth. But it was hard because a lot of people were really committed to their community activism. And the university really took it away from September until June. But they would be out there all summer long going at it hot and heavy. But then once they came back to school, they had to, kind of get back onto the academic program, because, it's very difficult here academically. I mean, you have to stick to your guns and, spend weekends and so forth at Suselo, and you weren't in the community that much. And if you were burning the candle at both ends. And I know I did it working, but not while I was in school. It was just almost impossible. The people working here on campus at the time, we had a real small office starting out, and there's no way that we would have been as successful as we were it not for all the people across the campus. And I've only mentioned a few, but in the English department, there was Bill Hilliard that helped to put together our reading and writing test to see to it that the kids we were bringing in had the skills in order to be successful if they really worked hard. George Monk, Professor Monk in the math department, Leonie Pitternick in biology, and I'm probably missing some, but these people were really instrumental in helping to support the program. And also Gene Hundley, who taught in the summer program and taught in the English department. And we would have these little short summer programs for about 3 to 4 weeks to bring the students on campus, to get them oriented and give them a little taste of like what the classwork would be like and so on. And Pat Fisher, who worked for years at the Times as a writer, she was one of our teachers in the summer program. Dr. Mona Lake Jones, who taught for years at Seattle Community College and who's a noted author and poetess now, she taught in our summer program. So we really had a lot of help in doing what we were doing, and that we later built on that to the point where we created the Office of Minority Affairs. And I would hope that you take the opportunity to interview Dr. Kelly and talk with him, because he's just incredible guy, and I worked with him very closely for a lot of years, and it was great, and we had a lot of fun. Dr. Odegaard was incredible. He had this presence and this aura about him of a commander-in-chief, because in part his naval background, and he and Sam Kelly kind of shared in that, because Sam was a retired lieutenant colonel from the Army, and they were real close. And we always had his support. And also things that happened, like when we'd get in some conflicts across campus, and there were very few, although some traditional schools were a little more difficult to work with than others, like the medical school. But I would go in and kind of say, hey, I'd like to help you and work with you however I can, but if you don't want to really cooperate with us, then, I got Sam Kelly will come over. Oh, no, never mind. Yeah, we'll see if we can't work this out with you, Bill, and we don't want to deal with Sam. He doesn't have to come over here. That's okay. But really, we were really fortunate to have the kind of cooperation we did. And I think it also stemmed a lot from Dr. Evans' kind of command, being a former Faculty Senate chairperson, and helped to steer the Faculty Senate kind of in a way to support what it was that Dr. Odegaard wanted to achieve. And the students really aimed their guns at Dr. Odegaard and the hierarchy, the regents. But as you know, a university operates very much through its faculty. And so Dr. Evans was very effective, I think, in marshaling the forces among faculty people and deans to kind of get them to come along and support the program. And so we were very fortunate here. And that's why, as I said before, I think the program is still here and is as strong as it's ever been in terms of its services to students.